Welcome back to the deep dive. We are here to take a stack of dense, often decades-old sources, the kind of research that shifts entire scientific fields, and really extract the essential, high-value knowledge you need. Today, we're embarking on an exploration of two foundational papers from 1996, both published in the journal Ecology, and, well, they collectively challenge some fundamental assumptions of invasion biology. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, we're diving into a really critical conceptual moment in ecology. For decades, you see, the field relied on these pretty rigid binary classifications for species movement. We sort of assumed we had a clear grasp of who belonged where.
Right. Native or not native. Simple.
Exactly. But our sources today show that this simplicity actually created massive blind spots. It really undermined our ability to predict the future of ecosystems. So we start with James T. Carlton's pivotal work, Biological Invasions and Cryptogenic Species.
And then we pair that kind of shocking realization about our unknowns, with a search for predictability. We turn to the study by Marcel Rezmanek and David M. Richardson, which look at what plant attributes make some species more invasive. So our mission today is pretty clear. First, confront this vast category of species we literally cannot categorize. And second, examine a breakthrough methodology for maybe finally predicting invasion success. Okay, let's start with the traditional understanding. When ecologists talk about a species status, they usually place it into one of two buckets, right?
Right.
It's either native, so indigenous, endemic, or arrived naturally, even way back in prehistory, or it's exotic, meaning humans brought it in somehow. So why does Carlton argue this simple binary just isn't enough?
Well, it's really a problem of historical data gaps combined with just continuous human action. The classical ecological default was sort of, and unless you have concrete proof of a human introduction, like a shipping manifest, maybe a record of deliberate planting.
Yeah, the smoking gun.
Yeah. Exactly. Without that, the species must be native. But Carlton points out, when you consider the sheer scale and the duration of global commerce, centuries of trade, whole fouling, moving livestock, plants, oysters, that assumption of native until proven otherwise becomes, well, pretty reckless, especially in places humans have heavily impacted, like ports or estuaries.
Okay, so if you're looking at a species in, say, a busy harbor environment, and there's no clear record either way.
Yeah.
You can't confidently call it native, but you also can't prove it's introduced. Is that the idea?
Precisely. You are left in limbo. And that necessitated a new neutral category. This is the origin of the key term, cryptogenic species.
Cryptogenic, okay.
Yeah.
From the Greek cryptos, secret and a genic origin. So it literally means a species that is not demonstrably native or introduced. It's got a secret origin story that science just can't resolve.
That's it. And it's not just an ecological term, which is fascinating. Yeah, the word cryptogenic was actually used historically in medicine for infections or diseases where the entry point or the source of the pathogen couldn't be positively determined.
Ah, interesting. So that same inability to pin down the source applies, whether it's a tiny germ or a whole barnacle.
Right. It reflects that fundamental uncertainty. We have to acknowledge what we don't know.
And Carlton's paper makes two really big claims here. One, that these cryptogenic species are astonishingly common, and two, that ignoring them profoundly distorts our whole understanding of biological invasions.
Well, the challenge of quantifying this category is that historically species that were just widespread, cosmopolitan, occurring everywhere, they were often just filed away as native. There wasn't much critical investigation into how they actually got there. They were sort of ignored as a separate conceptual problem.
Okay, so how did Carlton manage to put a number on something that was, well, by definition, an unknown? They must have needed a system where the research effort was really exhaustive, right? And where human impact was, maximized.
Exactly. They focused on shallow water marine systems and specifically the really well-documented San Francisco Bay in California.
Oh.
This bay is kind of a perfect model system. It's been systematically studied for decades. And critically, it has species that occur transoceanically without any obvious natural way to get across. And it's been subjected to intensive, century-spanning human commercial activity. Shipping, ballast water, moving oysters around.
Right. The perfect storm for introductions.
Precisely. And this is where the ecological baseline just fundamentally shifts. In San Francisco Bay, the research revealed, and this is a conservative estimate, mind you, that 100 aquatic plants, animals, and protists are cryptogenic.
100. Wow. Okay, that sounds like a lot, but what does it mean in context?
It is a lot. When you combine the known introductions with these cryptogenics, The cryptogenic species alone represent a striking 37% of that total number.
Wait, 37%?
37%.
So more than 1 out of every 3 species we thought were non-native, we weren't sure about, in a place like San Francisco Bay. Its origin is scientifically unresolved.
That's exactly right. It's huge. Think about the implications.
And it seems like the smallest species, the ones at the bottom of the food web, they're the most mysterious.
Absolutely. The planktonic primary producers, the phytoplankton, they harbor particularly large numbers of these unknowns. They're tiny, they get moved around easily in ballast water or on hulls, and their histories are just nearly impossible to track.
So this isn't just a San Francisco problem.
Not at all. If we broaden the scope, preliminary estimates suggest that in other big estuarine systems, like Chesapeake Bay on the East Coast, the number of cryptogenic species might exceed the number of currently known introduced species by maybe 3 times or even more.
3 times, good grief. The scale of the unknown is just...
Massive. It really is. So what for conservation, for predictive ecology? It's profound. If a third or potentially much more of the species in a system are unclassifiable, then we are necessarily underestimating the true scale, the true ecological impact of human-mediated biological change. We're essentially working with a grossly inaccurate census of life.
And this isn't just like a philosophical point. It actively messes up our ability to build reliable predictor models, doesn't it?
Precisely. I mean, to build a risk assessment model in invasion ecology, you need reliable input data. One crucial concept is propagule pressure. That's the quantity, quality, and frequency of arriving organisms.
Right.
If 37% or more of the organisms that successfully establish actually arrived cryptogenically, then you are dramatically underestimating the historical propagule pressure for that location.
Right, you're missing a huge chunk of the arrival history.
Exactly. So you're trying to calculate future risk based on skewed historical metrics. It leads to misleading impressions of which communities are truly susceptible, which invasion corridors are most dangerous. The whole foundation is shaky.
It feels like embracing this cryptogenic category requires ecologists to, I don't know, swallow a bit of pride, admit they don't know the origin of huge parts of their system. I can imagine that was met with some pretty intense skepticism when the idea first came out.
Oh, absolutely it was. There's a great example. The mangrove-destroying isopods, Seroma terebrans down in Florida, for decades everyone just assumed it was native. A part of the furniture, ecologically speaking.
Okay.
When Carlton questioned its native status, suggesting it might be introduced, local biologists reacted with, well, genuine surprise and skepticism.
They couldn't believe it.
They couldn't imagine a really foundational species in their system possibly being an outsider. It just highlights how deeply entrenched that default assumption of native really was.
So if the old system of proof needing that smoking gun record failed, what was the path forward? You mentioned Carlton and colleague developed a new set of criteria. What did that look like? I mean, listing over 20 criteria sounds like a massive task. Can you give us a couple of concrete examples? What do scientists actually have to look for now?
It was a massive undertaking, really, to formalize objective criteria. They moved way beyond just looking for historical records. They brought in biogeographic evidence, mechanistic stuff, genetics, ecological lines of evidence, a whole toolkit.
Okay, so more forensic almost.
Kind of, yeah. For instance, 2 key criteria they proposed are things like biogeographic rarity in the putative native range, meaning if a species is super common in the new place, like Florida mangroves, but you can barely find it back where it supposedly came from, that's a big red flag.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
That's another. Another big one is looking for genetic evidence of population bottlenecks, or just generally low genetic diversity in the new location. That often indicates a small, recent founding population, which is typical of introductions.
Right, like only a few individuals made the trip.
Exactly. These kinds of criteria demand really extensive scientific investigation before you can confidently assign native or introduced status. And until that work is done, the species has to remain cryptogenic. It forces a higher standard of proof.
Okay, so this profound realization that we have so many unclassified inputs, these cryptogenic species, it kind of forces us to look differently at the successful outputs, right? If we can't reliably trust the starting line data for everyone, maybe we can at least get better at predicting who crosses the finish line successfully among the species we do know arrived more recently.
That's a great way to put it, and it provides a perfect narrative bridge to the second paper we're looking at today, by Rejmanek and Richardson. Historically, there was some deep pessimism in the field regarding the possibility of finding predictable attributes of successful invaders.
Really? Why the pessimism? Seemed like something everyone would want to figure out.
Well, the problem was the entire field was kind of relying on contingent qualitative observations, lots of stories, but not much hard data.
Hmm.
And critically, there was this huge bias. People only studied the successful invaders. They almost never had robust data on the species that were introduced but failed to establish.
So you're only looking at the winners. Hard to find a pattern if you ignore the losers.
Exactly. You're only studying half the equation, maybe less. It makes finding universal rules really, really difficult.
So Rijmanek and Richardson changed the methodology. They focused on a single, really well-defined group, the genus Pinus. Pines. They're huge, complex trees. They take decades to mature. It seems kind of counterintuitive that they would be the key to simple predictability. What analytical advantage did they get by picking such a seemingly challenging system?
But that's where the technical brilliance of the study lies. They chose pines precisely because they are a monophyletic group.
Meaning they all evolved from one common ancestor.
Right. All pines share a relatively recent common ancestor. This allowed for a highly controlled comparison. It minimized a lot of the random genetic variability you'd get comparing, say, an insect and a grass. It let them isolate a few key life history traits that might truly drive invasiveness, separate from all the other evolutionary baggage.
Okay, so it's like comparing apples to slightly different apples, not apples to oranges.
Pretty much. Plus, pines are economically important, which means humans have moved them everywhere globally, often into countries with similar climates to their native range. And crucially, their life history data, how fast they grow, seed size, etc., is exceptionally well documented because of forestry.
Got it. So by controlling the variables, having good data on both the successes and the failures within this tight genetic group, they managed to crack the code.
They did.
So what were the predictable traits they identified? This feels like the big payoff.
The finding was really a direct repudiation of all that previous pessimism. They found that the invasiveness of pines is, in fact, highly predictable, and predictable based on a small number of simple, easily measured biological characters.
Simple. Like what?
The three most significant predictors of invasion success in pines were 1. Small seed size, 2. A short juvenile period, basically how quickly the tree can start reproducing, and 3. Low cone serotiny or cone mass, which basically means the cones open easily and the seeds are relatively light, easy to disperse.
Wow. Small seeds, quick reproduction, easy dispersal. It's almost obvious in retrospect.
Well, maybe, but putting the numbers to it and proving it statistically was the breakthrough. The small seed size helps dispersal, obviously.
Okay.
The short juvenile period means the species establishes a self-sustained population much faster before something wipes it out.
Yeah.
It's the combination of these simple mechanics that makes the difference, not necessarily some super complex, hard-to-measure genetic interaction, at least for this group.
So it shows that if you pick the right model system, control the background noise, and apply rigorous quantitative analysis, you can actually find powerful general predictive theories.
Exactly. It was a stunning discovery at the time because it really shifted the field, or started to, from just qualitative observation towards quantitative prediction based on fundamental biology.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from defining this vast category of ecological unknowns, the cryptogenic species, all the way to identifying a genuine breakthrough in predictive capability with the invasive pine study.
Yeah, the two papers published back-to-back in 1996 really provided these parallel essential lessons for ecology. The work on cryptogenic species, it serves as this profound warning. Our global estimates of invasion are subject to substantial error. Future research simply must incorporate an analysis of these unknown species, their diversity, their ecological significance.
You can't ignore the mystery box anymore.
No. And conversely, the work on pines showed that rigorous, focused study on carefully chosen model organisms can deliver the general, predictive ecological theories we desperately need for conservation and management.
So the path forward, then, it seems like it requires these parallel tracks. We need to keep doing the painstaking work of applying objective criteria to resolve the secret origin of species, while also applying these kinds of simple biological character models, like the pine study did, to predict risk in other major groups of organisms, not just pines.
That's right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I think both papers together really forced ecology to mature a bit. We simply have to move past that comforting, simple, native exotic binary. We need to do that to accurately assess the true scale, the true impact of human-mediated biological change on the planet, the uncertainty represented by cryptogenics, and the predictability hinted at by the pines. They're really two sides of the same coin. They both force us to be much more rigorous in how we conduct invasion science.
Yeah, the main aha moments today are pretty undeniable. The fact that, 37% of recognized non-native species in a place like San Francisco Bay have this secret origin, that fundamentally shifts the ecological baseline we thought we were working from.
Absolutely.
And then the realization that the invasiveness of a complex, woody group like pines is surprisingly predictable based on simple stuff like seed size and how fast they grow up. That's huge, too. So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, you now have this key conceptual tool, cryptogenesis, for looking at the world around you. You can question what you think you know about the local plants and animals. Next time you see a really widespread cosmopolitan species, maybe don't just default to assuming it's native. Ask yourself, is it really native? Is it introduced? Or is it cryptogenic?
And maybe here's a provocative thought for you to chew on. If these studies from '96 forced us to realize just how many ecologically significant species we couldn't actually classify, what does that suggest about the accuracy of all the ecological studies done before then? Think about it. What major ecological dynamics, maybe shifts in nutrient cycling, maybe trophic cascades might have been misattributed, blamed on climate change or natural fluctuations, when they were actually driven by these overlooked, unclassified cryptogenic species, quietly reshaping the ecosystem all along?
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the sources that really redefined biological invasions. Keep digging, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.